and they had the benefit of what we were talking about. But this generalist idea very definitely evolved and was in the publication that became sort of the Bible for the movement at the time, the roles and functions for mental health workers. It spelled out that concept and the roles that that kind of person would have to play in the community.
On that point, there are 13 roles that the generalist human service worker would play. Why those particular roles? Advocate, caregiver, broker. There were a whole host of things. Why were those particular 13 chosen as the critical ones?
Well, I think when you talked about, what kinds of things would this person do when he saw formerly mentally ill or mentally retarded kids or whatever coming in from the community, they were the kinds of things that in many cases a social worker would do, but they were at this sort of entry level, you're the first responder that you need to see, and often that's all you need. You don't need a whole lot of help, but you need some, and some of it's caregiving, some is sort of diagnosing, evaluating what is this person's situation, what are the resources that you can do. I guess the most controversial role of those was advocate, because most people were thinking of advocacy as something where you go down and give talks to the legislature and wave flags and maybe throw a bomb or two. But what we had in mind was just being able to help this person make a contact to get a job, a place to live, work in a sheltered workshop or something like that. And so often you run into the situation where they say, well, we can't take people till they're 12. Or we can't take them after they're 15 or something. So what do you do with them between 15 and 18 when the other agency says we can take them? Well, frequently you can persuade that agency to make an exception for this person. And how do you do that? It's personal advocacy much more than system advocacy as such.
How did the term mental health worker become human service worker?
Now, one thing we found early on was that with our evaluation efforts was that these people were getting jobs doing what they were trained to do, but not necessarily in mental health agencies. In fact, mental hospitals were so rigidly structured with their psychiatric aides and so forth that relatively few of these people got jobs in the traditional mental hospitals. Now, they got them in aftercare programs, sheltered workshops, halfway houses, and so forth for the mentally ill. But they also got jobs working like in assisted living centers for older people, in special ed programs for any disabilities. Very frequently, the smaller schools had a classroom for all kinds of disabilities. So you had kids with vision problems and hearing problems and mental health problems and all in the same classroom. And there was a special ed teacher who was in charge, but she needed an assistant to say, take care of these kids while I work with these and so on. And they got jobs like that where they did just fine. They could say it was consistent with their training. But they weren't mental health, as such. And so we found the terminology in their jobs switching to human service rather than just mental health. And of course, our grant came from a National Institute of Mental Health, so we tended to keep talking about mental health workers in our reports back to them. But actually, the thing was obviously clearly moving. And by the time we had ended the project, we'd been influential in establishing a national organization of human service workers and the Council for Standards in Human Services Education.
Would you describe the certification that you had in mind at that time?
Well, I don't think at the time we started this program we had certification in mind, but as the graduates began to come out, there was also an increasing movement in all of the health professions, particularly, to have workers certified if you weren't certified or licensed or registered by some agency, Medicare and Medicaid would not pay for your care. And so if these people were going to get paid, they needed to have some kind of a certification or registration in order to qualify. And now most of the health insurance programs have picked up on that same idea. So it's more than Medicare and Medicaid. So that obviously became a necessary thing. But that was a later project. I guess we'd been working in this area for 5 years with the colleges and developing the curriculum guidelines and practicum training.
Hello and welcome to another episode of your Human Service News and Information. I'm Hassan Rashid, your host, and I'll be here with you for approximately 25 more minutes. It's excellent being here with you, and it's such a great achievement to come into your lives like we do here at Cctv daily. So with that, once again, I greet you and welcome you with the cordial of peace and sanity. Okay, before we get into the broadcast, I like to I like to send out my thanks and support and congratulations for the first responders, those who were first on the scene to assist in the recently 10-alarm fire here in Cambridge, in the Harrington, Wellington neighborhood of Cambridge. So once again, I send out my thanks and all good wishes to all the first responders, those people whose actions in the fire alarm prevented the loss of life. That's right. There was no one that there was no loss of life in the recent 10-alarm fire in Cambridge. So once again, thanks for the first responders to that event. Okay, there's at neighbormedia.org. That's more than ever. The 10 years of Cambridge news and views by you and your neighbors. So let your voice be heard. Are you passionate about your community? Are you concerned about your rights and the rights of others? Are you concerned about social justice, the environment, housing development, education, or mainstream media? Let your voice be heard. Neighbor Media is the citizen journalism project of the Cambridge Community Television. We train Cambridge residents to become multimedia reporters, support them in their pursuit to inform, educate, and move the people of Cambridge into action on matters of importance to them. Neighbormedia.org reports Cambridge news and information you won't find elsewhere in the mainstream Boston area media. These are stories about the people, places, issues and events of our reporters, very own neighbors, neighborhoods, schools, communities, and organizations. All news with the perspective that only Cambridge citizen journalism can give. So you report, you get paid. And now you can earn a small stipend for every CCTV approved article or video you can contribute to Neighbor Media. So we want you and invite you to join us at our free info session. That's to learn more. It's Thursday, January 12th at 6:30 p.m. CCTV 438 Massachusetts Avenue, Central Square. So you can RSVP 617-661-6900 or email Frank at cctvcambridge.org. That's come and get involved with 10 years of Cambridge news and views by you and your neighbors. That's right here at the CCTV. Now you can earn a stipend for every CCT approved article or video you contribute to neighbormedia.org. That's neighbormedia.org. Check that website out for additional information on how you can become involved and become a citizen journalist. Okay, last week I promised to read into a little bit about how the governor slashes the spending. Okay, so administration officials for months have warned that spending needed to be scaled back because revenues are tight and some major accounts were underfunded in the budget that the Democrat-controlled legislature sent to the governor in July. The governor opted against a major pruning of state spending in October when his team took other actions to address a nearly $300 million budget gap. But Baker said he was unwilling to wait until January to make spending cuts as he did last year. House and Senate leaders Tuesday immediately pushed back against Baker's decision, calling it premature and not necessary. it's pretty clear that with the deficiencies, we need to fund court-ordered attorneys, snow, ice, emergency assistance, stuff that I think there's general agreement that we're going to need to pay for, and the downturn that we are seeing in revenue despite the success of our economy, that we needed to take action at this time, Baker told the news service after a meeting with the GOP leaders. Okay, so a lot of people are still pushing back on the cuts that Baker instituted. Okay, he trimmed 53 million. I think it was right here. It says $53 million to address the $3 million budget gap. Okay, moving right along. The AB Associates. They're like a think tank that's home base right here in Cambridge. AB 3-year family option study led to a $11 billion request from HUD, that's the Housing and Urban Development, to fund the evidence-based solutions that can reduce the number of families who are experiencing homelessness in America. Okay, in 2016, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development sent a bold budget request to Congress, $11 billion over 10 years to reduce the number of families experiencing homelessness in America. Okay, HUD request was based on clear evidence gathered by the AB Associates, okay, the AB Associates, that's ABT Associates, that giving families priority access to housing voucher subsidies helps families more effectively than other interventions aimed at reducing homelessness. The evidence was collected through the Family Option Study, a 3-year random assignment study that tracked families for 37 months. So AM Associates come up with the conclusion that to provide homeless people vouchers was the best method of ending homelessness, best way of addressing family homelessness. That was to provide them with government subsidized vouchers, okay? Homelessness in the U.S. was down slightly over the past year. People in Denver lined the sidewalks near the Denver Rescue Mission in October. Helen H. Richardson, okay, she's from the Denver Post, okay? People in Denver lined the sidewalks near the Denver Rescue Mission in October. Okay, homelessness in the U.S. declined over the past year. Even so, there were large increases in several cities, including Los Angeles and Seattle. Overall, almost 550,000 individuals were homeless on a single night earlier this year, according to a news report by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Okay, this report will be available online soon. So when that happens, I'll let you know. I'll share that with you. That's a 3% decline from 2015 and continues a downward trend in homelessness over the past few years. The numbers are based on an account conducted in January by communities across the country. They were also declining almost every homeless category, including veterans, family, and the chronic homelessness, okay? But some areas bucked the trends. Washington, D.C. saw a 14.4% increase in homelessness, over 1,000 more people, and there were an additional 2,680 homeless people in Los Angeles County, an increase of 6.5%. The Dallas and Seattle areas also had been increased to 21.3 and 6%. So what this article is saying is that homelessness was down in the U.S., but in several major cities and regions, it was not. Okay, if I have a list of the regions that they say that homelessness is still kind of high in. Okay, I don't have that today, but as soon as we get that in, we will share that with you. Okay, where are all the social workers going? The social workers, where are all the social workers going? Turnover in the field has reached crisis level in some places, pushing them to figure out how to hire and keep the right people. Okay, turnover in public sector jobs is a ubiquitous problem, but when it comes to social services, the problem is particularly painful. One well-known study found that with one caseworker, the chance for a child to achieve a permanent and stable living situation was 74%. And if a child had 2 caseworkers in 1 year, the odds dropped to 17%. With 3 caseworkers, it was a mere 5%. Okay, turnover is devastating, said Scott McCowan, a former judge and now director of Children's Rights Center at the University of Texas Law School. If you're a caseworker, you develop a relationship with the parents and child. That's what helps you help them. But every time there's a turnover, you start from scratch. If clients find themselves working with a different social worker every few months, their confidence in their case willingness to comply with bureaucracy can be lost. Constant workforce churns costs not just clients but government money. Training a new social service worker costs $54,000, according to the Texas Senate Committee on Finance. Once turnover persists, it creates conditions that lead to a seemingly never-ending cycle. Experienced caseworkers don't have time to mentor new ones. Caseloads increase, backloads develop, tempers flare, pressures rise, and burnout shows no sign of fading. This is an issue in most of America, but in some places it has recently reached crisis level. In Kentucky, a third of the social service workers in the state's largest county has been lost to turnover since January. Tim Feely, the Deputy Secretary for Health and Family Services, said the county has reached the breaking point in Texas. An auditor report last year found that social services had the highest turnover of all job categories. 25% of employees were jumping ship within 1 year. Okay. The difficulty in hiring and retaining social workers has pushed agencies to make changes. The Texas Child Protection Service dropped its education requirement for workers. The state now accepts workers with an associate degree and a couple of years experiences. Observers say this puts the educational requirement more on par with the state's salary, which can be as low as $33,000. So I guess it's a matter of low wages, burnout, and the work itself. Okay, that's what's happening to our social workers. We're gonna go into that when time permits. Not this year. This year's just about wound out. But next year we're gonna go into that a little bit more. I'd like to bring your attention to the opening video. That was just an interview with the founder of Human Service Education as it is here in the United States and elsewhere on earth. And that was Dr. Mac Feeders. He founded the Human Service Education curriculum as we have it here in America. And he was just recently, not too long ago, interviewed, and I wanted to share that with you to bring you update on the origins of human service education as we have it here in the United States. Okay, I wanna give you a few more minutes of Dr. Mafita's interview, but and then after that we're going to come back with the winter plan for persons experiencing homelessness in Cambridge here. That's the winter's is knocking on our door, and it's going to be cold this winter, and I want to just get out some information on, if you know homeless people, you can steer them or guide them on what to do when the weather gets real bad this winter. Okay, we're going back to Dr.
Training ideas and so forth. And then it was toward the end that this need for certification became more obvious. And so we had another project at the end, 2-year project, to develop a certification program and test it.
If you were hiring a human service worker today, what particular skills would you be looking for in that individual?
Well, like I said, it'd be the skills of those roles. And then a couple things that we talked about a lot that get to be a problem. And we found this in the evaluation on the certification project. Our certification test that we developed had knowledge and skill items, which are the traditional things we train in and test for and so forth when you're hiring somebody. But why do you fire people? You fire them for personality problems. You fire them for value problems. Now, when you think about it, all the skills you would want for a human service worker or a social worker are the same skills that you would want for a Nazi interrogating, one of the guys who works for the CIA and beats the people at Gitmo and so forth. You'd want the same identical skills, but a whole different set of values, a whole different set of personality skills. And those are things that academia didn't want to fool with. Job hirers don't want to fool with them either, but that's why they fire them.
Okay, that was Dr. McFeeters, and he was the founder of the current contemporary educational system that revolves around human service, standard human service education. He was the founder of it. Okay, now, winter planning in Cambridge for individuals experiencing homelessness is focused on ensuring that all individuals have access to indoor shelter to protect from adverse weather conditions, to mitigate risks to individuals who choose to remain outdoors, and to proactively work with outreach teams and first responders to protect against life-threatening conditions. Cambridge has a network of homeless service providers, faith-based partners, public services, that coordinate effort during extreme winter conditions. The information below represents the current plan. Okay, so I'm going to give you the information that represents the current plan efforts that occur in Cambridge during extreme winter conditions. Routine and expanded service capacity described by the service types. Okay, so overnight, there's an overnight emergency shelter. So if you run into someone that needs overnight emergency shelter, you can refer them to Cambridge has 7 nighttime shelters that operate during the winter. You can refer them to the Casper Emergency Service Center, the First Church, Harvard Square Homeless Shelter, Heading Home Shelter, and Salvation Army Shelter, St. Patrick's Women's Shelter, Y2Y Youth Shelter. Okay, so if I got the information, I'm going to give you the addresses of some of these places. Okay, so the Casper Emergency Service Center, they're located at 240 Albany Street, Cambridge, and you can call them at 617-661-0600. So if you got a pen or however you record information, I advise you to write this down or record this. That's the First Church Shelter, men only, 11 Garden Street, Cambridge, 617-661-1873. Harvard Square Homeless Shelter, that's a 66 Winthrop Street, Cambridge, 617-547-2841. Heading Home Shelter, 109 School Street, Cambridge, 617-547-1885. Okay, they're listing referral required, but I guess in case of an emergency storm, a natural storm disaster, you can call these places and they will take you in regardless of the rules for referral only, to get you out the bad weather and to prevent things like hypothermia, etc., etc. Okay, and so there's a Heading Home Shelter, 109 School Street, Cambridge, 617-547-1885. Salvation Army Shelter, that's 402 Mass Avenue, Cambridge, 617-547-3400. And the St. Patrick's Women's Shelter, 270 Washington Street, Somerville, 617-628-30515. Okay, then there's the Y2Y Youth Shelter, 1 Church Street, Cambridge, and their telephone number is 617-864-0795. Okay, so there's also what's known as daily drop-in centers. Okay, so there's the AIDS Action Drop-In and Needle Exchange at 359 Green Street. Their telephone number is 617-661-3040. Heading Home, drop-in, women only. That's a 109 School Street, Cambridge, 617-547-1885. And they're open every day, 12 to 2 p.m. Okay, there's the On the Rise. That's 341 Broadway, Cambridge, 617-497-7968. And there's, once again, the Salvation Army, 402 Massachusetts Avenue, Cambridge, 617-547-340. So all these places are doing great jobs with those homeless people that are in need of emergency service, etc., etc., street outreach. Okay, so also on the list here, first responders, is the Cambridge Police Department. So if you can't get any results anywhere else, you're advised to contact the Cambridge Police Department. So you can call 911 if it's an emergency. If it's in a medical emergency, you can call the Cambridge Police Department. Okay, so there's some other places here. Weekly drop-in meals, Tuesday meals at First Parish Street, Church Street, Cambridge. Thursday meals at Church Christ Church, 0 Garden Street. Friday cafe at First Church. Saturday meal at First Korean Church. And Youth and Fire. You guess what? We've just about run out of time, but you can count on me sharing this winter emergency information to help homeless people, etc., in our upcoming broadcasts. Okay, I'm Hassan Rashid. You know, it's always excellent being here with you, and this is such a great achievement to come into your lives like we do here every week. You know, I want to leave you with this fact that you should all keep your nose clean and play it straight so that you can be successful. And don't forget to assist someone in need of your help. Until next time, I leave you with the okay, let's see if we can get this on the ancient greetings of peace and sanity.
It's the hardest thing about not having your own house. You know, when we did live in a shelter.
Everything.
What's everything?
Everything up in the shelter. I'm just saying everything.
The hardest thing about not having our own home is like how I dream to be successful and accomplish things.
Do kids at school know you are in a shelter?
No.